All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. I am here. Well, first off, I'm Jeff Miller, the head of GMAT instruction here at TP. And I'm super, super pumped to welcome you all here and also to interview Isaac. He is a ex-target test prep student who absolutely dominated the GMAT. He got a 790 with a very fun breakdown of quant 51 and a verbal 50. So the two fives, you don't see that too often. So today we're going to chat with Isaac and we're going to learn a little bit about his experience with using target test prep, his experience with his GMAT prep, and a bit of his background. So, you guys can see exactly where he started and where he got to. So thank you, Isaac, for joining us today here.
Sure. Great to be talking to you, Jeff.
All right, cool. Well, we'll jump in here. And guys, if you have questions we're talking here and you want some clarification on things or points on anything, feel free to jump in and I'll try to, get those questions over to Isaac as we're chatting here. So I guess the first thing, Isaac, that would be helpful for everybody is could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm from New York City, and I've went to Wesleyan University in Connecticut for undergrad. Was an economics major there. So I did, have some quant background coming in, but definitely has been a while since that. I'm about 4 years out of school now. And currently I work in the advertising technology space at an ad tech company called Kinetics. I've been at this company for the last 3 years or so, after 1 year at a bigger ad agency. And yeah, that's my general background. And then for the GMAT, I took that exam in beginning of March, and that was the one time that I took it.
Okay, cool. Very cool. So I actually live in New York as well, so that's interesting to see you grew up in New York. So that's pretty cool. And obviously your GMAT went extremely well. So what's going on with your plans for your MBA?
Yeah, no, I'm been thinking about it for a while, but took me a little bit to get to the point of being prepared to take the GMAT to start applications, especially during COVID. So I'm definitely ready now and excited to apply in round 1 in the fall. Hoping to enroll in fall of 2023 at schools.
All right, cool. Yeah, I mean, now that your GMAT is set, you're well prepared. I think essays are going to be announced pretty soon, right? So you'll be well in round for round 1. Do you have any schools in mind that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I'm definitely I'm a fan of UVA Darden, Yale SOM as well, but a few others. But I think I'll probably end up applying to 6 or 7 schools. And yeah, like you're saying, we're still waiting for those essays to come out. So it's a little bit of a quiet period right now, which is nice. So it was definitely nice to get that GMAT over with in March and have a couple months here to really consider that strategy and have the summer to actually work on applications. Yeah, sorry, Jeff, I can't hear you. Can you hear me, Jeff? No. Well, I'll wait for Jeff, but I can maybe start getting into some of these questions. Let me just wait 1 minute until see if Jeff can get back on. Yeah, while we wait for Jeff, I'll jump into some of these questions. From Louis or Lewis, did you finish your verbal test on time or have plenty of time? Oh,
I think we're back. Okay, I just moved to a different location. I think we'll be good now. Thanks for hanging in there for a minute.
no worries.
All right, so there's probably some questions that have been asked already, which is great. Oh yeah, what's your preparation strategy? Pretty much everything. So I guess where we left off, oh yeah, the schools you're thinking of applying to in the next, for this fall, basically.
Yeah, so to quickly recap my answer there was I'll probably apply to 6 or 7 schools. I'm a big fan of UVA Darden and Yale SOM as well.
Oh, good. Okay, great. So do you have any location preferences, or you're pretty much open to the schools that are your best fit?
Yeah, I'm pretty open in terms of best fit, but looking to stay on the East Coast post grad, so probably not, some of the California schools, I would say.
Okay, cool. So I know you started talking about this as I was relocating here, but obviously I'm sure people are super interested to see how you prepared for the GMAT, your strategy, etc. I mean, getting a 790 is something that very, very few people do. So I'd just be interested to see or to hear about some more of that, exactly how you went about your prep.
Yeah, definitely. Say that, it was the score was a combination of, having background and quant and verbal, of, having a lot of time to do this preparation, of going through TTP really in depth. And then, to get a 790, you have to get lucky on a couple things because, even in the practice test that I was taking right before, I was getting like 770s in the 2 that I took right before. So there was still a bit of luck there. But to dive into the
teeny bit of luck. No luck in getting the 770, but
no.
Perhaps a teeny bit of luck in getting the 790.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, no, and I started, thinking about preparation probably in late 2020, and had just the OG guide, and was doing some casual reading from there, I would say, and then got more serious in the spring of last year, and so that's when I started using Target Test Prep. And so I used it first for a 4-month period from March to June of 2021. And during that period, I went pretty in depth through, I think I completed the majority of the quant section, focused pretty much on quant during those months. And then I was pretty busy with work in that summer and fall. So I took kind of a break from studying. and then returned to it at the end of last year, then resubscribing to Target Test Prep in January and February of this year before taking the test in March. And so, that gap in the middle there was definitely, I think it was nice to have that gap to refocus and
Right.
think about, was still doing some practice questions whenever I could, but definitely wouldn't recommend that long of a break, because when I restarted intensely in December and January, it took me 2 or 3 weeks of serious studying to really refamiliarize myself with some of the things that I had missed.
Right.
But a lot of it was still there, I would say.
Good. And how integral was the TTP study plan? It's funny, since you have used the course, we actually added in a calendar feature, which, actually breaks down exactly what to study on which day. It's really cool. And it's an addition to what you had. But, in general, when I talk to students about how to succeed on the GMAT, I mean, I don't think I have a conversation that doesn't involve you really need a structured study plan. So given the fact that you had so long to study and you took a few breaks here and there, how important was it for you when you knew you were sitting down with the TTP materials to be okay, well, here it is, it's all laid out. I just do what's in front of me and keep this thing moving forward.
Yeah, I think that calendar feature does sound like a great addition, because, like you're mentioning, the difference for me was between those periods where I was more casually studying and when I was really focused, was that I was using Target TTP. And having that structure around a clear progression of things to do really helped, instead of just watching videos or taking practice tests or questions whenever I had a chance. So yeah, I did myself allocate a certain number of hours per week that I wanted to commit to Target Test Prep. And even when I was using it, you could see how many hours you were using it per week,
Right.
things like that. So that was a way for me to stay on track during the time that I had, because especially once I restarted and had reviewed everything in mid-January and had a test at the beginning of March, that was 6 weeks. I knew I needed to be pretty intensive.
Right. And okay, and this is interesting too. So we get this question a lot. I'm shooting for a 750. I'm shooting for a 760. No one's actually said 790, but maybe now they've seen this, they'll adjust their expectations. So, okay, you scored a 790. As far as we have set score goals that you need to hit on the chapter test.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there were times you didn't hit those. So what was your process like there, if and when you didn't hit some of the score goals assigned for the chapter test or custom test or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. There were chapters where, I'd say, going through the material, doing it in depth, doing all the questions in the lessons, as well as, and then starting with the easiest of the chapter tests and going up through the hardest. There were some chapters where I was able to get to the hardest level without, with certainly a number of errors still, but passing the set scores, which I think were a great guideline. But there were definitely other chapters where, I'd get to those benchmarks and the easier ones, and then by intermediate and advanced, I was getting a lot wrong. the first time I went through them. So I'd say the key feature there were the error tracker feature. So, and then going back and maybe reading through some of the lessons, but in most cases it was just reading through those error trackers, the questions that I've gotten wrong, and really redoing them in full. Often maybe doing like another chapter first and coming back to these. So, I didn't necessarily remember the specifics of each question, but I could, so that I could really focus on doing each question in full. And that was definitely a key part of getting better at certain areas that I needed to. And yeah, that was definitely having that was also, I was able to identify which chapters I needed work on. Because there was definitely a wide variety between, say, like basic GMAT math, which I had down pretty well, versus like permutations, which took me a while to get comfortable with.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like there are topics that like come back to you quick. There's some that maybe you've seen in college, even if you took a few math courses, and then some stuff that's completely new. And so, yeah, I mean, that's another good question. So we have built-in review in the study plan. Like we say, okay, here's a review quiz at the beginning of every mission. Every 4 missions or so, there's a larger review test. We are telling you to go back to your error trackers. That was one thing you mentioned. Now, were you also, like, as you were going through lessons, were you taking notes and having stuff handy? So let's say, on a moment's notice, you wanted to just do a brief review of number properties or rate questions. Like, did you have kind of a set of flashcards or notes that you could work with?
Yeah, definitely. I had definitely my own notes. I knew, you provided the note guides that you could have with each.
Yeah, the active review sheets, right?
Yeah, the active review sheets I personally didn't use. I like writing my own notes and understanding exactly where, because for most cases I was only taking those detailed notes for areas that I was having more trouble with.
Right.
And then for, other cases, I would just go back and redo the lessons sometimes.
Right. And I think we covered this, but just to reiterate, because someone asked, you did follow the study plan as it was laid out, and you worked through it methodically, right?
Yes. On the quant side, I went from beginning to end in full, which does take a decent amount of time, I will say, but is that's what allowed me to get to the 51. And then in verbal, I'd say, because when I had first started in spring and summer of 2021, the verbal was a little different than it was now, or when I had it again in January. But I definitely used, I think I went at least 75% of the lessons I completed in full that first time, across both times.
Cool. That's awesome. And, obviously people are here. They're interested to see how you got the 790, of course. And so I guess one of the questions that would be interesting, you did try out some other resources. What did you find interesting or unique about target test prep that you just didn't find in other prep materials or other prep courses?
Yeah, definitely. I think like you're talking about structure, that was really key in my preparation, and having a structure that forced you to take lessons in certain orders. Some other material has great explanations, but There's no real, I didn't find that there was often any rhyme or reason as to the order that you were doing it in. It was just, here's this topic, let's do it in full, then the next topic. And you know, where some other providers use like videos, and some people learn pretty well through videos. I think that I was thinking it's like the videos are a great introduction often to a subject. Say, for subject verb agreement, like it's a great introduction to that, but to really understand the types of problems you're going to be asked, you need to get into actual problems and seeing them and working on them and reviewing your errors and doing that in a really organized way, not just going through a practice test and then doing another practice test until you get better. So
Yeah.
I think that way of forcing you to actively learn and interact with the material, and then identifying areas of improvement and creating a study plan based on that, was what was most unique about Target Test Prep.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point, and it's a question that does get asked every so often. You know, where are video lectures, or do you have more videos? Now, we of course have like hundreds and hundreds of video solutions to our example questions. Yeah. And you know, the fact that we made a written course was done by design. We do feel like you can get a little more in depth with written material, which it sounds like you agree with. And the nice thing about written material too, Isaac, and I'm sure you can attest to this because you said there were certain things you knew better than others. My guess is you dove in to certain concepts or topics with a level of depth that was greater than other topics. So I don't know, and I say this to students a lot. I say, okay, well, if you know how to add and subtract fractions in our essential skills chapter, you don't have to spend 35 minutes on it, right? Yeah. But if you struggle with the remainder formula, maybe you do. And by having written materials, you can pick and choose where you do that deep dive and where you don't, as opposed to, say, a video on it where, I mean, I guess you can watch it at 1.5 or 2 times the regular speed, but you can't, when you skim through a video, like it, you know, you're just skipping stuff. You're not like kind of scanning it and saying, okay, I got this, I can keep moving. So did you enjoy that aspect of it that allows you to kind of have a handle and be efficient when you needed to be?
Yeah, definitely. And it forces you to really understand if you actually are understanding what you just watched. So like I had mentioned with, say, permutations, where I didn't, I remember any of how to do it from high school, let's say.
Right.
I started the chapter in Target Test Prep, and it took me, a while. I realized that I was kind of slow and getting through it and was getting things wrong. And so that was a case where a video was helpful.
Right.
And I know there are, the videos that you did have from Target Test Prep as well.
Right.
So those are the cases where you really need like an introduction where it was helpful, but really just that one time, and then getting into the written material that forces me to actually read it, actually do a practice problem, then go to the next section.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. That, that's a really cool aspect of the course too that I love, and was a big thing that I was into as we created TTP. And I knew, like, what a lot of textbooks will do, or even not even GMAT textbooks, but across the board with quant or verbal learning is that sometimes you'll learn stuff and then you're going to get this very like watered down, mild question on the topic, so it doesn't necessarily stick. So our goal with each one of these lessons is to really ingrain it with actual GMAT like questions, but not to bog you down by doing 10 right at that very moment. It's about, hey, here's 2 or 3 more. Take your time on these. If you have to sneak ahead and look at the solution, do it. If you need to watch the video solution, do it. And then, by the time you get to the end, and this is to my next question, you get those great chapter tests. So even thinking about combinations and permutations, like how helpful, because you said that was a topic that was essentially being learned from scratch, how helpful was it to be able to say, okay, now I'm going to do, I don't know, 3 or 4 easy tests on that topic, eventually get to mediums, and eventually get to hards, very like gradually and systematically. Like, was that kind of a game changer with, your learning?
Yeah, definitely. And like you were saying, those questions that come up during the actual lessons were not all easy questions. And
Correct.
So like my rate of success on those was not always super high. But I think that was okay because you're exposed to like the type of question. And then going to say easy, running through 5 or more easier 10 question sections or something like that makes you, it's a lot of problems, and it forces you to really understand kind of the basic types of questions that are going to be asked. Because the reality is, for each section, there's not like a huge range of types of questions that are actually going to be asked on the GMAT.
Right.
So understanding kind of the full breadth of questions that could be asked on that topic, I think was done pretty fully by the introduction, the easier tests, and then intermediate, and then advanced.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, that's it. I mean, to me, that's an aspect of TTP that it's weird because you look at it and you're like, oh, this is obvious. This is how I would like to learn, at least from my standpoint, because I helped make the course. But yeah, if you take a bird's eye view, it's like, yes, this makes complete sense. And I'm glad you saw that. But yeah, not everyone does it. That's fine. That's what we do. Now, 790. We talked about a lot of quant. There's the Q51 right below your picture or video, and then there's a V50. So
yes,
target test prep over the years, Issac has been known for their quant.
Yeah.
Why? Well, we came out with quant first, and then we spent a number of years working on verbal. And the fun thing is we've had a lot of verbal success, like your verbal 50. We've even had some verbal 51s, which is super cool.
Yeah.
So for those out there, because I'm sure plenty of people are interested in hearing about it, like, how would you kind of in your own words and experiences describe the verbal portion of the target test prep course?
Yeah, definitely. And I'd say, because the quant section is so thorough, at least for me, like I learned quant and verbal, I feel like I learned them differently. So quant, the fact that you can go so in depth into each section, really cover the variety of types of questions that you're going to be asked, can be done. The format that TTP uses is amazing, but I don't think that format would work exactly on the verbal side, and that's not that that's what you're providing either. I think because on verbal, say for something like reading comprehension, it's really, I found that the way that I was getting better is, first having that really a really good strategy for approaching a question. So that was the first part, which the TTP lessons do very well. And then you just really need to practice reading a lot of passages and trying to follow the strategies that you were given from TTP. So, that first part is it can be done kind of similarly to how it's done on quant. And then that second part is really just going through a lot of passages, and it's not as necessarily obvious of what's easy versus advanced in that, but the questions were broken out into different categories in a good way. And also, like in quant, there's no way to cover the entire range of types of questions that you're going to be asked for, say, reading comprehension. So it was really about understanding the patterns. And I think that's what I got from both for reading comprehension and critical reasoning. Those are the focuses. And sentence correction, you can do a little more ordered. And so going through the full section on idioms or sentence verb agreement in that manner of doing the lessons and then doing easy problems, medium problems, and hard problems, that way, I think works very well for sentence correction also.
Yeah. And I think people are asking about some questions, so maybe we'll scroll through those in a minute. I just have another question for you. So we talked about the learning phase, and then you briefly kind of alluded to this earlier with your practice exam. So, the way that study plan is laid out is as you know, you go through the entire learning phase where you learn all of GMAT quant, all of GMAT verbal, and then we get to what's called the practice test phase of target test prep study plan, where you're basically doing a bunch of custom tests, some based on your weaknesses, some based on all of the topics, and then diving into the 6 total GMAT practice exams. So did you follow that phase as it was laid out? Did you feel ready to jump into those tests? Were you pleasantly surprised with how well you did in those practice tests, just after finishing it? Because I know there is a level of anxiety. It's probably not the same level of anxiety that you would see on the real GMAT, but like people get it. So I'm just curious of how that went for you.
No, I followed that pretty much exactly. I wasn't like taking a lot of practice tests during the middle of my study or anything like that. I think I took one towards the beginning, and then one after I'd done that 4-month section of target test prep.
Right.
And then probably 3 in the last 2 weeks before I actually took the exam. So that was pretty much the same thing. And I definitely was pleasantly surprised by how I was doing. I think sometimes there were a lot of easy questions that I felt pretty well prepared for. And the harder ones, I did feel like I had some understanding of where to go. Whereas when I took the ones closer to the beginning, there are plenty of times where I, had no idea where to start and either was searching for way too long or gave up and went to the next one.
Yeah.
And that's, and timing is a huge piece of where I improved, because I think I had mentioned in the debrief that that first full-length practice exam, I did get a 700, but I was not being stringent with my time per question, and so I would pause the exam plenty of times and
Oh no.
keep going. That was not a fair way to assess the 700, but it was, I had no discipline in terms of time.
Right. But you want to do well, so you're like, what's a pause?
I wanted to understand the questions, and
yeah.
there was like, if I even understood how to approach a question. No, the time really did throw me off, both on quant and verbal to start.
Yeah, I say it to people all the time, especially those starting out, where it's like, okay, get a baseline score, and then they come back and they're like, well, I paused it, and I knew I should have been able to get this question right, so I paused it, and then I did it, and then I resumed it, and it's like, well, that's not really giving you your baseline score. So yes, that's a warning to all of those taking your practice test. It's pausing your exam will not lead you to a 790 per se. And that's pretty cool what you said about how your timing got better. And I'm assuming the answer to this is yes, but I'm guessing on the quant section, on your practice, and probably on the real GMAT, I'm guessing there was probably, 3 or 4 questions that came up where you're like, oh my gosh, like I've literally done this in TTP. Like, I don't know, like a unit digit pattern question where you're dividing and you're getting a remainder when you divide by 5 or something like that. I'm guessing you had a few questions that hit you and you're like, boom, I got this. And if so, I'm sure your confidence was sky high. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I think definitely there were plenty that came up like that. And I think you're right to use, like, confidence and timing had a lot to do with each other, because having gone through a section and doing questions related to that section, I definitely felt a lot more confident that I would at least have a starting point. I knew what kind of question this was,
right,
what it was trying to get at. And once I had that confidence, I was able to dive in a lot quicker, I would say, to trying something out if I didn't, or hopefully I understood what they were going for, and I could take a second, read over the question in full, and start working the first time on a solution that would get me to the answer. Right.
And I will say this, in my experience, as a test taker for the GMAT and working with students, I mean, and this is a concept of life. I mean, I'm not saying anything that no one hasn't thought of before, but getting confidence on the GMAT, I mean, it's a game changer, because once you kind of nail one of those questions, or you smoke out a data sufficiency trap, and you're like, hey, there's 2 variables here in one equation, but wait a minute, I can answer this. Like, that is so big for being able to get through the test at the highest level. And of course, it can go in reverse. If your confidence fails, then yeah, you could have some major issues on the test. So I think getting a few of those questions that are just identical almost to things that you've done, or very close to them, can be huge. And clearly you didn't get a 790 by not having confidence. So my guess is, as the exam grew and went on, you became more and more confident. And I mean, I guess it might be moot, but what was the order of your test? Did you do quant or verbal first?
I did do quant, then verbal, because I felt that I did have more confidence on the quant section, and so I wanted to go in strong there.
Right. Now, when you finished the section, were you like, I think I rocked this, or were you kind of like, maybe I got a 48? Like, because it's weird. I always tell people, don't guess where you're at, because you may think you got your butt kicked and you didn't. or vice versa. But I'm just curious because you did get a Q51. How were you feeling after that section?
The quant section, I felt pretty confident coming out, because I had, certainly taken, there were no questions where I had no idea what was going on. I think there was probably one or two where I ended up having to make an educated guess at the end, but
Right.
There were none that completely stumped me, which I had run into on practice chest just 2 days earlier, let's say.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think, it's tough when people ask about section order. Something to think about is if you can build confidence in one section and that confidence bleeds over to the next one, we're talking about verbal versus quant, like, I don't know, maybe it does make sense to do your stronger section first. So you're feeling really good going into the other one.
Yeah.
So,
because for verbal, for me, it was sometimes harder to assess how well I was doing during the process. There were much more cases where I was, say, 80% sure of an answer than
right.
in quant, where I was either 95% sure or 40% sure, let's say.
Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah. No, I mean, all really good advice. I think, you're a walking testament to what a lot of people are shooting for. Now, not everyone's going to get a 790, and nor do you need it. But heck, if you can walk away with such a score, I mean, it's super amazing. So, I want to get to some of these questions. I know
for sure.
Many have been asked. One question is about the custom test feature and how you used it. And then they asked, and how are questions compared to the difficulty level of the GMAT? Now, before I have you answer that, for those who don't know, we have a feature on Target Test Prep where you can kind of build custom tests. In the study plan, we actually built custom tests for you, so it's not something that a student particularly has to do. But if you get to the end of your prep and you're like, hey, I want to do a mixed quant set on inequalities, absolutes, rate problems, and geometry problems, you can make that test, set the difficulty level, set some parameters. So, I mean, you followed the study plan through and through. So I'm just wondering, to answer that question, did you use the custom test at all?
Only the ones that were built in through the actual course. I didn't create my own additional ones. I was just doing the custom ones that were built in as review during the between the lessons, and then the additional work that I was doing was really based on the error trackers and ones that I had already missed.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I think in time we're going to build out a feature where from the error tracker you can build out custom tests, which I know is going to be helpful. We're definitely going to enhance that error tracker over time. Now, I know you answered this question, and I believe it's a year is how long you studied.
With Target Test Prep was 6 months, but there was a break in the middle of, let's say, 6 months where I was not, it was more casually studying.
Yes. Okay. So a year, but not quite a year. And it seems like you took the GMAT about 2 to 3 weeks after being done with TTP. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I was still looking at some practice tests or a question or the error tracker maybe 2 days before the actual exam. So I was still using it even just before the exam. But I had completed all the lessons on the quant side and all gone through the amount that I was going to get through, including all of sentence correction and I believe all of reading comprehension on the verbal side. Yeah, probably about 2 weeks before the test.
Okay. And, we talked about you following the study plan. We have like dedicated reviews and global reviews as part of the study plan. And, granted, those are things you can be doing throughout if you want to. How did you do those dedicated reviews and those global reviews as you neared the end of the learning phase?
The ones in between lessons, or the one at the end?
At the end, I mean,
Yeah.
or either. I mean, how were you doing your own? Because we're kind of leaving it up to the student to say, okay, now is the time to go do a review. Like, what were you personally doing? I mean, you mentioned the error tracker. Were you just like saying, okay, I'm going to review my notes for 30 to 45 minutes? Were you doing stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. So in those places within the lessons plan where it's suggests that you go back and review certain sections or everything, a global review, everything until now. Yeah, I would always look through the error tracker. I would look through my notes in full, and would look through the equation guide as well, and maybe go back to like maybe one of the intermediate or advanced problem sets from one of the areas that I knew was a little more difficult.
That's good. Yeah. And I love the equation guide. Love
Yeah.
it. I helped make that when we first came out with TTP, like many years ago. I was like, this is a no-brainer. There's just nothing out there like it. And we really just encompassed all the major components from our chapters. You can print it out.
Yeah, my notes were pretty much often identical to the equation guide, or based on those things in the equation guide, because having those is a pretty solid foundation for each section.
Yeah, totally. Like, if you get an average rate question, you need to know the average rate formula. I mean, if you get a question on the surface area of a cylinder, you need the formula. So yeah, and those are things you can kind of do like off onto the side, where you're like, okay, I kind of need to get away from studying for a little bit, but I'm cool taking these out and looking at them. And as I always say, like, you can take those anywhere. So
yeah, for me, I printed that out and would take it anywhere. And then on the verbal side, the idioms guide is what I printed out and took that anywhere to review those ones also.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you're on public transportation going to work, I mean, I don't know if you're in New York, but you said you were from New York, but like
Yeah,
for me,
still in New
okay,
York.
right. So, if I would hop on the train, I'd be like, okay, well, I've got, 15, 20 minutes. I'm just going to pull that out and start reviewing it. So, yeah, it's great. I mean, it's all these things kind of culminate, and it's probably what got you to that 790. It's never just like one thing or another thing. It's like, am I doing all of the right things that can kind of sum up and put me in the best position to succeed? And yeah, you had to perform really, really well on test day. There's probably people who are capable of 790s who score 740s. So, certainly kudos to you for just, going out there and as they may say, pitching your best game on the day of the test. Let's see, any other questions? Well, one question is, and this is kind of interesting regarding your GMAT, like, did you have to make guesses on any number of questions? Someone asked that. I'm guessing it couldn't have been that many, or educated guesses for that matter.
Yeah, not too many on quant. On verbal, there were definitely a few that were educated guesses, I would say.
Right.
But for verbal, I'd say there's, for me at least, it was always, there was so often, one that I was, felt like, say for sentence correction, one I felt like was, this was okay. This doesn't seem the most clear. And then 3 where I could clearly find an error, and then deciding between those last 2, I was, like one felt a lot better, but I didn't remember a specific rule that was uh, uh, eliminating the other one per se. But that kind of just took a lot of familiarity with those types of questions to get better at choosing between those last two options.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's always a tough thing for students. And someone else asked, and I know we got to wrap up pretty shortly, but you worked full time. Most test takers do work full time. So, there you go. There's a second question related to that. How did you revolve your studying around your work? Like, what did that schedule look like, hours per day, when you actually did your studying, weekdays, weekends, etc.? How did that look?
Yeah, I definitely tried to have a set time on most days that I would do a little bit of study. I think that a little bit each day worked a lot better than there were times where, say, on a Saturday I would do 6 hours of study, and that wasn't as helpful and would burn out. Then I wouldn't want to do the next week, let's say.
Right.
So I think getting in a good rhythm where I had a set time, for me, it was usually in the mornings before I started work, but it was fine to do it. Sometimes we do it, at night after work and anything else I was doing for the day. But just doing, even if it's just half an hour, I think that was very helpful. But yeah, for most of the time, I would do, maybe half an hour and then towards the end, it was more like an hour plus on weekdays, and then maybe on a Sunday too, a couple of hours.
You were hitting what, like maybe 15, 18 hours a week? That much?
Yeah, that sounds right. 15.
Yeah. I always tell people to try to shoot for 18, but when you how often, I guess, is somewhat personal, but most people can't be like, well, I'm going to study for an hour and a day. They probably need more. But as far as when you do it, if you can swing it and you're pretty good in the mornings, you can get up and bang out your tutoring and go about your work day and not have to worry about it after work. You can switch it up. Some days you can do mornings, some days evenings. And then, as you said, weekends are huge. And you just gotta, unfortunately, you gotta prioritize. There's probably things you'd rather be doing on the weekends, or you personally would rather have been doing. I know I felt that way when I studied for the GMAT, but you got to make it like your second job almost until it's done.
Yeah, and having a structure where you feel accomplishment after getting to the next section was good too. To be able to get to the next section, feel like you accomplished something for the day, and can start again the next day. Whereas if you're just taking practice tests, questions over and over, you don't know exactly when you stop.
Yep, totally agree. All right, well, I think we basically got through most of the questions here, and I think we pretty thoroughly covered your journey. Again, Isaac dominated the GMAT. He scored a 790. Quant 51, verbal 50. So everybody at Target Test Prep is super happy for him. I'm sure Isaac is super happy for himself as well.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. I'll look into at least the YouTube stream, and you can comment on anything there.
In Isaac's on GMAT Club, he's got a life too. So keep that in mind. He's not going to be sitting there all day, but if you ping him on GMAT Club, he may be able to get back to you. He can share a lot of what he shared here, and he'll do his best to help everybody out. But definitely thank you so much, Isaac, for hanging out today and answering some questions. And congratulations again. Thank you, everybody, for joining and battling through my internet issues earlier. So this has been great, Isaac. So thanks again.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for hosting, Jeff.
All right. Well, we'll talk to everybody soon. Thanks again, everybody.
All right, bye.